Welcome to my fourth Blender 4.91 tutorial. This will cover setting active object, text editor, while statements, and how to pull up demo scripts. What we're going to do first is we're going to create an object, which will be a sphere. And now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to assign a sphere to bpy context.activeObject. And you could do it this way on each one of the objects you create, or you can use a selection function for getting the object back. When you put more than one object in a scene, you're going to start running into issues with jumping from one to the other. So this is one of the big stumbling blocks that early programmers make. They get in here and say they're working on the cube and they want to switch to the plane, and then they have a problem. So there's two ways to deal with a problem. First way is this way, where you're actually assigning it to active object, and that way you can get back to it by going like this. Let's see what's active right now. Alright, so cube's active now. And now plane's active. So that shows that that actually works. There is another way, and I wrote a function specifically for it. And this time it's got to be in string form. Set sphere is active. And I made it so it'll actually select it too, so you actually see that it's selected. Let's see, where did here it is. And that confirms it. So you will probably want to refer to this, back to this sooner or later, because you're going to either want to be able to set these up this way or use the name function to retrieve the object once you've got more than one object in a scene. Alright, and then let's see, let's go here, go into edit mode, and let's see here. For selecting and deselecting in edit mode, it's a different set of code. Select, deselect. And you're also going to see this a lot. The reason why you see it a lot is every time that you run it, it just toggles between selected and not selected. So it's a lot easier than using these right here. Okay, and now we're going to go over bmesh a little bit. I'm not going to get too deeply into bmesh, at least not with these initial tutorials, because bmesh is more intensive. Working with bmesh, note that bmesh is more complex and unforgiving as far as coding goes. bmesh is faster, as the code for it is leaner than the bpy.ops functions. As a beginner, you can experiment with it, but keep in mind that the time spent with bmesh code will likely be much more than you spend on bpy.ops code. And so this function I wrote out, and let's go ahead and run it. And then, as you note down here, I made a if-then statement that kind of deals with like if the user puts in bad input. And while I was doing that, The first way I did it was I did it using this sign, and I did that because of the C# programming I've been doing lately, and it's a different thing in Python. You actually have to use OR statements. So basically what it's testing is the first parameter has to be 0 if you want a vertex, 2 if you want an edge, and 4 if you want a face. So what it does is it tests has the person put in a 1, which wouldn't be anything because it's 0, 2, 4. Has a person put in a 3, or has a person put in more than 4? Let's say, no. Let's take this whole thing out of here. Then we can go item equals, let's say 1, which would be a kind of an illegal. Alright, so somebody selected it, so then it's going to print out this right here. I should say somebody's used a bad index. And so like if I put in a good index and then I rerun it, it's false, so it's not going to run that print statement. Anyway, that's what that's about. So we're actually running the function. We're going to select vertex 4. And here we'll produce that directory on how to do it. That selects edge 7. And this will select face 3. Alright, so that's that function. And then in here, I put in a reference for all of the operators in Python. Some of you probably never use, but it's handy to have them. And I also included a link for Geeks for Geeks. They're a pretty good site to look for information on Python and even other programming languages. And this little function is really easy, but we're going to be moving to the text editor, so I want to show you. Actually, let's take this stuff out of here first. So I want to show you in the text editor. First, if I try to paste something into it now, it doesn't respond. So you would either have to open up a text that you've already saved or create a new one. Once you create a new one, then you can paste it in. And in this case, it will not run. I'll show you why. Let's try running it and see what happens when you... Well, it did. Oh, because I already did it before. But anyway, when you first start out, you're going to have to put import bpy at least. If you don't do that, then it's likely to error out on you. And now, as you notice, you're not seeing a printout down here, you're not seeing a printout here or here. And the reason for that is when you're in the text editor, your console is actually located in a different spot. I already have it open. Every time you toggle it, it goes open or close. Okay, so there's where it actually printed out the information. Now, the reason I did this is because I wanted to show you something else. We're going to go back to the console, and we're going to enter that function there. As you notice, it tells us that this line of code has a problem. And it says that problem is indent. But we know that this ran right here So we know that it's good code. And plus, it didn't say anything about this, so when you start seeing something like that, you're probably going to want to look at what comes before it. And what comes before it is a space. And because that space is there, it's rejecting that next line of code that follows. And so it's taken the function as just, it's just print out test 1. Now the way that you would fix that so that you can run it in the console is either remove the space or put in a pound symbol, just like you're putting in a comment, and then you can take it, run it, and it'll run fine. But that's one of the things you're going to want to remember, because sometimes you're going to want to test out code that you have in the text editor in the console. It's one of the good ways of troubleshooting and analyzing code. But when you try to run it, you're going to get a whole bunch of those errors that say improper indent, and that's what it is. That's where it's coming from. It's coming from an empty space somewhere. And I don't say empty space here because you can't do this. Well, actually you can, because it's not a loop. If it was a loop, you can get away with this, I believe. Nope. I was right in the first place. You have to have a blank line after the function. So, Blender Python is a little tricky like that. Let's get rid of this. Alright, and then I'm going to run this function just so that it's in there. And we're going to go down here, and I created a bunch of stuff that creates a feather. And we're going to take that, paste it in the text editor. So we have this function that I just ran in the console just so it'd be in there. And then we have the part that creates the feather. And then we have a part that creates a feather tip. And this basically just takes a feather tip on the feather and creates them, sets it so that you can create them together. And looks like I got these things in here twice. Take them out then. And then we've got something for rotating and for translating. And then I want to show you also for the text editor. You might notice when you paste your stuff in here, it might look really plain and doesn't have any line numbers. You want to have line numbers. I mean, if you get an error or something, it'll tell you then what line that it's on. So you click this to put in the line numbers, click this for word wrap for in case you want it to wrap around. I usually don't wrap it around, but and then this for the coloring, which helps a lot too. Alright, so let's run this so you can see what it does. So what it does is it creates that feather, and for some reason it's creating two planes. Let's get rid of that. There, I left it in the scene. Anyway, so it creates a feather, and it puts the rotational axis in the right place when it creates it. And now we're going to delete this tip, and then let's go back up here. And then we're going to create, and hold on, create here. So we're going to start by creating a plane for the tip, transform it so it's the same size as the tip of the feather. Subdivide it. Then we need to toggle. And then what this is going to do is it's going to set n to 0. And it's basically going to be each vertex in that feather tip. And then it's going to run through them. And every vertex it's going to add 19 to it. And the n is just going to go up until it runs out of vertices to do. As you can see, it moved it, but it left the pivot point here. And that was the whole point of moving it like that, rather than like some other form, like doing it manually or whatever. Through code, you can do it, but let's focus on this. So it's important on how you do it as to what result you get. You can move it and have the pivot point stay the same, or go with it. Okay, so this line of code, what it's going to be doing, it's going to be taking vertices, and let's go to vertices. It's going to be grabbing vertices, and it's going to be editing vertices by number. And these toggle, you can ignore these because they're just there so that you can see what's happening as I go through. And then it's just each one of them is changing the number for whatever vertex it's operating on. So let's take so as you can see, the numbers and the coordinates are changing, but nothing else in the code is, and that's why copy paste can be a big friend for you when you're programming. So you can like copy a whole bunch of these, paste them back in, and then change the numbers for whatever you need to do. Like I got one pasted in there that shouldn't be in there. One extra. Anyway, and then take this, run all these, and for some reason this didn't move like it was supposed to. I'm not going to troubleshoot it because I don't want to spend the time on within the tutorial. And then we're just going to extrude it, and I need to be in edit mode to do that. So what works in the text editor doesn't always work in the console. There's different reasons for that. It just depends on what you've got going and how you're doing it. So anyway, so that's how I made the feather tip. Let's delete that, and let's delete this, and then go down here. And what this is going to do is it's a while loop, and it's going to take R as minus 49, count as -1. So it's going to look at, it'll say while count is less than 12, do this. And it'll keep going around until count gets equal to 12. And first thing it does is it adds 1 to count, making it 0. And then we don't need this because I took out the parameters. We don't need parameters on that anymore. And then it's going to create the feather, and then it's going to rotate the feather, and then for R it's going to add 7.9, and then it's going to come back up here. Count's going to be 0, so it'll be less than 12, and it'll just keep doing this until it reaches a point where count hits 12. When count hits 12, it's just going to go beyond it. It's not going to operate on any of these. It's going to go to the next set of code. Okay, so let's see it in action. We can take this feather create out. Alright, so we get kind of like bird's tail feathers. And then I can probably, it doesn't have the perfect texture on it right now, but that's what it would look like with just plain texture. And that pretty much does it for this tutorial. I haven't covered all of the stuff in the functions and everything, so like if you have a question or something, on the bottom of the page my email address is always there, so you can send me a question on anything about this that you don't understand.